My name is Bernard Wakefield, and I was 57 years old the spring my son told me I was no longer part of the family I helped build. He didn't use those words. He never said anything directly. That wasn't how things worked in my son's house anymore. What came through was a text, 11 words. No greeting, no period at the end, the way you'd cancel a dentist appointment. We're keeping Finn's birthday small this year, just close family. I read it standing in my garage, grease on my hands from a carburetor I'd been cleaning, afternoon light coming through the side window at that low spring angle that makes everything look like it's ending. Finn was turning 10. I had promised him a fishing trip to Copper Lake, the same lake my father had taken me to when I turned 10. His gift was sitting on the shelf above the workbench. My father's tackle box, old aluminum with a bent latch and his initials scratched into the lid. CW. I'd kept it for 30 years waiting for the right boy to pass it on to. Close family. I was his grandfather. I didn't know what word they had for me if not that. Before I take you back to the beginning, I want you to know how this ends. I want you to know that 6 weeks after that text, while I was sitting in a terminal at Charlotte Douglas Airport, my phone lit up with 13 missed calls from the son who had just told me I was extra. 13, not 1, not 2, 13. Now let me take you back. My wife Christine died 14 years ago, aneurysm. She was 42. I was driving back from a job site when it happened, and by the time I got to the hospital, she was already gone. Donovan was 23. My daughter Hazel was 19. Neither of them was finished needing a mother, and suddenly they had only me. I ran an electrical contracting business out of my garage. After Christine died, I picked up night shifts driving for a regional freight company out of Gastonia to cover the gap. I did that for 3 years and never told either of my kids how tight things were. Donovan's scholarship had fallen through his sophomore year, some administrative error that took all year to untangle and ultimately never got fixed. And I told him the college had found him an alternative aid package. I covered the rest myself. All 4 semesters. I'm not telling you this for credit. I'm telling you so you understand what it meant when that text came in, and why 11 words cost me more than they probably should have. When Adrienne came into Donovan's life, she came in fast. She was a commercial real estate agent. Sharp, polished, the kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately started calculating what needed to change. She wasn't unkind, not at first. She shook my hand firmly at that first dinner, asked good questions, laughed at the right moments. I thought she was impressive. I told Donovan so on the drive home. The first thing I noticed was small. She called me Bernard. Not Dad, not Mr. Wakefield. Bernard, every single time. I told myself it was just her style. Some people aren't raised to call anyone Dad. The second thing I noticed was also small. At their first Thanksgiving together, I offered to host the way I always had. Adrienne had a different idea. She wanted to do it at their place, which was fine. What wasn't fine was arriving to find the table set for 8. Her parents, her sister's husband, their 2 kids, and Donovan. 2 extra chairs had been brought in from the study, she said with a smile, for me and Hazel. Brought in from the study, like we were an afterthought, someone had to accommodate at the last minute. I let it go. She was new. She was establishing herself. I understood that and I let it go, and I drove home telling myself I was being gracious. I understand now that what I called gracious, she called ground. It didn't escalate loudly. It never does. It happened the way a slow leak ruins a house. You don't notice until the ceiling comes down. The year after they married, Finn was born. I held that boy in the hospital while Donovan was filling out paperwork, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. The particular kind of hope you can only feel when a new person arrives in the world, and you get to be part of their story. I drove 40 minutes each way on Saturday mornings to sit with him in the backyard, teach him to dig, name the birds. He called me Pop Pop until he was 3, then switched to Grandpa because someone at daycare told him Pop Pop was babyish. He took it very seriously. When he was 6, I took him fishing at Copper Lake for the first time. He caught a smallmouth bass and held it up like he'd just won a championship belt. I took a photo. It's still on my refrigerator. That day I showed him my father's tackle box, the dented aluminum one, the latches worn smooth from 30 years of fingers. I told him about my father, how patient he was, how he could read the water the way some people read books. Finn ran his finger across the initials in the lid. Who's CW? Your great-great-grandfather, Clement Wakefield. Is that why we're Wakefields? That's exactly why. He looked up at me the way only a 6-year-old looks at anything. Like what you've just told him is the most important fact in the universe. Grandpa, when I'm 10, can we come back here with that box? I told him yes. I told him we'd make a whole weekend of it. I meant it the way I mean everything I say to that boy. Completely, without condition. Finn turned 9. Then the visits started getting shorter. Adrian had reasons, always reasonable ones. Donovan had a conference. Finn had a birthday party for a classmate. There was a stomach bug going around. I showed up one Saturday to find the driveway empty, a neighbor telling me they'd gone out for the day. Nobody had mentioned it. When I asked Donovan about it later, he said he thought Adrian had texted me. She hadn't. I was removed from the family group chat that October. Not dramatically. I just noticed one day I wasn't getting messages I should have been getting. When I asked Donovan, he said Adrian had started a new one for scheduling and must have forgotten to add me. She'd get around to it. She never got around to it. The Christmas card that year was one of those professional studio photos. Donovan, Adrian, Finn, in matching pajamas in front of a lit tree. It was a beautiful card. I stood in my kitchen and looked at every inch of it, looking for any sign that I existed to the people in that photograph. Then I set it face down on the counter and stood there a while. The calls got fewer. Donovan used to call on Sunday afternoons, a habit from his college days. Then it was every other week. Then just holidays. Then only when something needed fixing. A leaky faucet, a tricky breaker. Something in that category where having a retired electrician for a father was still considered an asset. Every time I noticed the drift, I told myself the same thing. Don't make it a whole thing. Don't be the father who makes his son feel guilty for building his own life. I kept the peace so carefully. I swallowed so much, so quietly, for so long that it stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like who I was. I know better now. Then came Finn's 10th birthday and the text. We're keeping Finn's birthday small this year, just close family. I set my phone on the workbench next to the tackle box. I looked at those initials, C.W. Clement Wakefield, who had driven 4 hours round trip to take a 10-year-old boy fishing because he said a man ought to know how to be patient beside water. Who never once in his life had to be asked twice to show up. I typed back, I thought I was close family. 3 dots appeared. They held for a long time, then they disappeared. Nothing came. I stood in that garage for I don't know how long, waiting for a message that wasn't going to arrive. I didn't cry. I've never been much of a crier, but something shifted in me in that hour, something quiet and permanent. The way a foundation crack starts. You can't see it, but the house knows. I should tell you what I've pieced together about how that text got sent. Donovan had the phone first. He'd typed something with an opening in it, something about working out schedules, something that left the door ajar. Adrian had taken the phone from him gently, the way she took most things, gently, without announcing the taking. She deleted his draft. She typed 11 words. She handed it back. It's cleaner this way, she'd said. If you leave room, he'll make it into something. He'll make it into something. That was me. I'd become a complication to be managed, a variable to be contained, and my son had handed her the phone. What neither of them knew was what was already in motion somewhere else. 6 years before I started losing my son, I had started something quiet. After Christine died and I'd finally come up for air, I'd gotten involved with the county fire department's community youth program. Not as a firefighter, but as a volunteer with trades experience. I taught electrical basics to kids aging out of the system who had nowhere particular to land. When county budget cuts eliminated the vocational funding, I started covering costs myself. Small amounts at first, out of the business account, never mentioned at any dinner table. Over 12 years, I helped put 19 young people through licensed apprenticeships. I kept a list in a spiral notebook in my desk drawer. I never told a soul. You keep some things to yourself not because they're shameful, but because the moment you say them out loud, they turn into something other than what they were. 2 days after the text, a woman named Chief Farley from the fire department called me. The department was holding its annual recognition banquet the following month. They wanted to honor me formally. 12 years of contributions, 19 apprentices. The chief wanted to present me with a distinguished service commendation. I almost said no. I told her I'd think about it. That same evening, my daughter called. Hazel lives in Portland now. She moved there for a graduate program 8 years ago and never came back. She teaches high school history. She calls me every Saturday without fail, rain or shine, no excuses. I told her about the text. She was quiet long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Dad, she said finally, come out here. Come spend Finn's birthday weekend with me instead. Let them have their small thing. That's across the country, Hazel. You've gone further for less, a pause. You've been carrying that fishing trip promise in your coat pocket for 4 years. Maybe it's time to put something in your own pocket for once. I booked the flight to Portland the next morning. I tried one more time before I left. I want that on the record. I called Donovan on a Thursday, kept it simple, coffee, just the two of us, half an hour. His voice went careful the way it did when Adrian was in the room. Yeah, Dad, sure. Let me just check with. The phone changed hands. I knew before she spoke. Bernard, it's Adrian. He is just completely swamped right now. You understand how it gets. Tell him I called, I said. Of course. I hung up and stood in my kitchen looking at the plane ticket I'd printed out. I still printed them because Christine always did, and I'd never seen a reason to stop. I thought about 11 words on a Tuesday afternoon. I thought about a boy on a staircase, listening. Because that's what happened next. Finn called me from a neighbor kid's tablet, face too close to the camera. Grandpa, are you really not coming to my birthday? I chose every word carefully. You don't put grown-up poison into a child's cup. Not this year, buddy. I'm visiting Aunt Hazel out in Portland. His face worked through something complicated. But we were supposed to go to Copper Lake. You said when I turned 10. I know I did, and I keep my promises. I said it steady. The fishing trip is still happening this summer, you and me in the tackle box. He dropped his voice like he was telling me a secret. Grandpa, Mom told Dad that you make things awkward. My chest went tight. Where'd you hear that? The kitchen. They forgot I was on the stairs. He looked down at his hands for a second. Do you make things awkward? I don't think so, bud. I don't think so either. Very serious about it. Then a door opened somewhere behind him, a voice. Finn, who are you talking to? And the screen went black. I sat in my kitchen a long while after that. You make things awkward. An adult's assessment borrowed by a 10-year-old who didn't know the weight of it. I thought about what kind of man lets his son carry that. I called Chief Farley back. I told her I'd come to the banquet. I wore my good sport coat. It fit differently than I remembered. The hall was full. Round tables, string lights, the smell of coffee, and whatever cleaner they used on the carpet, and something warmer underneath all of that. Chief Farley spoke for 15 minutes. She named names. A young woman in the second row stood up and said her brother was an electrical foreman now, that he had a crew of 8, that 3 years ago he'd had nothing, and her voice broke when she said it. One by one, people I half recognized stood up to say something. I sat there with my hands folded, ears burning, wanting very much for the floor to take me. I'm not built for standing in front of rooms. I build things and fix things precisely, so I don't have to. But I looked at those faces and something settled in me. The same something that had shifted in my garage, only in the opposite direction. These people had never once looked at me like I was extra. Afterward, by the coffee station, a man I didn't know offered his hand. Well-dressed, the kind that doesn't announce itself. Patrick Campbell. He developed commercial properties. He'd heard the name through Adrian's firm, he said. She handled some listings for him. She's never mentioned you, he said, not unkindly, just as a plain fact he found interesting. I can't say I'm surprised. He studied me for a moment. My son went through your program 10 years ago, he said. He has his own electrical company now, 16 employees, does mostly commercial work. A pause. Your daughter-in-law has worked with me for 2 years. Not once did she say who her father-in-law was. He shook my hand again, longer than necessary. That's something worth knowing, he said. Not really to me. More like making a note for himself. I drove home with the windows down despite the cold. Something had happened that I hadn't planned and couldn't have arranged. 2 of Adrian's worlds had touched without her hand on either of them. She had spent years keeping me out of the frame. It had never once occurred to her that someone else might be holding a wider lens. I packed light for Portland. 2 shirts, the hiking boots Hazel always demanded I bring, and the tackle box wrapped carefully in a flannel shirt in my checked bag. The night before I left, I sent Donovan one message. I thought about it for a long time. I could have been cold. I had earned cold. I could have mentioned the banquet, mentioned Patrick Campbell. mentioned 19 names in a spiral notebook. I didn't. I wrote the simplest thing I knew. I love you. I'm heading to Portland to see your sister for a few days. Give Finn a hug from me and tell him the fishing trip is still on. Happy birthday to my grandson. Then I turned my phone completely off at the gate. Not silent, off, black screen. I turned it back on somewhere over Nevada, paying for the in-flight Wi-Fi out of habit. To check the weather in Portland, that's when they started. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Notifications stacking on each other faster than I could track them. 13 missed calls, all from Donovan, one text underneath, just a line. Dad, call me when you can. I need to talk to you. I'm so sorry. I read it twice. Then I looked out the window at the dark and whatever city was glowing below us. 13 calls. The son who had handed his wife the phone, rather than meet me for coffee, had called 13 times in a single night. I couldn't call from the plane, but the moment my feet hit the jet bridge in Portland, I stepped to the sidewall and dialed. He answered before it finished ringing. A man who hadn't slept. I'm here, I said, talk to me. He talked for a long time. Patrick Campbell had called Adrian on a Saturday morning, casual the way clients sometimes are, making small talk. He'd mentioned the banquet. He'd pulled up a photo on his phone. He'd seen someone post it, he said, and asked if that was really her father-in-law up there getting a standing ovation. He'd mentioned his son, 16 employees. He'd said he couldn't believe she'd never brought it up in 2 years. Adrian had come home from that call quiet. Over dinner, something had broken open between her and Donovan, the way things break open when the pressure's been building long enough. He'd asked her something honest. She'd answered honestly, and in the honesty of it, Donovan said he'd finally seen clearly what had been happening, not just to me, to himself. How small a version of himself he'd been living as inside his own marriage. She managed everything, he said. The calendar, the invitations, what I said to you, what I didn't say. I kept thinking I was choosing peace. I wasn't choosing anything. I let him say all of it. Some things you have to say all the way through, or they don't stick. When he finished, I said, I know, and I let too much of it go without speaking up. That's on me too. It's not the same, Dad. Maybe not. But I could have said something sooner. A breath. I need to ask you something, and your answer is what matters now. Anything. Finn, I said, and my voice nearly went. I need to be his grandfather without asking anyone's permission. No canceled visits, no schedules handed down, no waiting to find out if I'm convenient this week. That's what I need. Yes, he said. Fast and certain. The way the true things come out. He's been asking about you every single day since his birthday. He keeps a fishing lure on his nightstand. I closed my eyes. He kept the lure. The blue spinner you gave him. He said he's saving it for the trip. I stood in that Portland terminal, travelers splitting around me like water around a stone, and I couldn't speak for a moment. Let me say hello to him, I finally managed. The phone moved, small hands, fast breath. Grandpa? That one word, the relief packed into it. It hurt to hear, and it was the best thing I'd heard in months. Hey, buddy. I'm sorry I missed the birthday. It's okay. He dropped his voice to spy level. Grandpa, are we still going to Copper Lake? This summer, you and me. I paused. I brought the tackle box to Portland with me. You brought it on an airplane? Checked bag. He laughed. That full-body laugh kids have before anyone teaches them to hold it back. You brought a tackle box on an airplane for a trip that's 2 months away? I carry my promises everywhere I go, I told him. That's how you know I mean them. He got quiet, serious the way he gets when something matters. I kept the lure, Grandpa. The blue one with the silver spinner. I didn't lose it. I know you did, bud. It's been on my nightstand since last summer. I know, I said again, my voice not entirely steady, I know. I stood in that airport, and I breathed all the way out for the first time since a Tuesday afternoon in my garage, when 11 words landed on my phone and wouldn't sit right. Hazel was waiting past the barrier, tall and grinning, waving like I might miss her in a crowd. She pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than it needed to, right there in the middle of arrivals, and held on. You came, she said into my shoulder. You asked. First time you ever listened to me about anything. She drove us through Portland in the rain, talking the whole way about her students and her neighborhood and a farmer's market she was determined to take me to. That evening we ate Thai food at her kitchen table, under a lamp that needed a new bulb. I replaced it after dinner, out of 30 years of habit, and she made me tell her the whole story from the beginning, while she listened the way she always has, completely still, like your story was the only thing in the room worth paying attention to. Christine had that same quality. "What are you going to do about all of it?" she asked when I finished. "Nothing," I said. "That's not mine to do." She nodded slowly. "What about Donovan? I'm going to forgive him. Not because what happened was fine. It wasn't. Because he's my son and he's still in there somewhere." Hazel raised her mug. "To you," she said, who finally stopped pulling up a chair at tables that never saved him a seat. I laughed because it was true, and because if I didn't laugh I was going to cry into the pad thai, and I'd already done enough standing quietly in the dark for 1 year. "Here's what I want you to take from all of this, because you've stayed with me this long, and you deserve the plain truth of it. For 3 years, I confused keeping the peace with keeping the love. I made myself smaller and smaller, easier and easier to step around, and I called it being a good father. But here's what I've learned the hard way about making yourself small to fit into someone else's frame. You teach everyone around you that small is all you are. I never called Patrick Campbell. I never posted anything online. I never said one word against Adrian to another living person. All I did was walk into a room full of people who wanted to thank me and let myself be seen. That was it. That was the whole thing. When you stop disappearing for the people who've decided you're optional, the ones who actually see you get louder." Patrick Campbell had worked with Adrian for 2 years. He knew my name in 30 seconds. She had spent years keeping me out of the frame. It never once occurred to her that someone else might be holding a wider camera. Donovan and Adrian are working through things in their own way. That's their marriage and their reckoning, and I stay out of it. What I know is that Finn calls me every Thursday now. Not because anyone set it up or managed it, because he wants to. Last week he called to tell me he'd looked up smallmouth bass feeding patterns in an online fishing forum, and had 17 questions. He was taking notes. This past summer I drove up. Finn met me in the driveway before I'd finished parking, and we loaded the truck for Copper Lake. 3 days, up before sunrise, which he thought was simultaneously incredible and deeply unfair. He learned to read the current the way my father taught me. He caught a bass bigger than his first one and held it up the same way. Pure triumph, no performance to it, just joy. The tackle box sat open on the bank between us the whole time, initials glinting, when the sun hit the lid right. On the second morning, Finn reached over and traced the letters with his thumb. "Clement," he said quietly, I remembered. "Good man," I told him. On the last morning, driving home through the early light, he fell asleep in the passenger seat with his cap tipped over his face and one hand resting on the tackle box lid, easy as anything. I drove the whole way home like that, quiet, grateful, not needing it to be anything more than what it was. Some tables always had your name on them. Some people always had a seat waiting. I just spent too many years pulling up a chair somewhere else, calling it love, calling it peace, not once asking myself why I kept having to ask permission to stay. I don't do that anymore.